You are 34 years old and you have done everything right. You saved, aggressively, for 11 years. No vacations that made financial sense, no car that cost what you could have afforded, a version of your life kept deliberately smaller than it needed to be because you were building towards something. The number in your account is $310,000. You have an idea. You have researched it for 2 years. You have run the projections. You believe in it the way people believe in things that can't stop thinking about at 2 a.m. You were about to put the $310,000 into the business. That is the mistake. Not the business, the funding structure. You don't know that yet. You are about to find out. The meeting happens on a Thursday afternoon, a conference room on the 38th floor of a building you had to be escorted into. The man across the table has started 7 companies. He has never used his own money for a single one of them. He is not reckless. He is not lucky. He understands something about capital that most people spend their entire careers not learning. That conversation is where your education begins.
His name is Marcus Tellen. He built his first company at 26 using a $400,000 SBA loan. He had $680,000 in savings at the time. He did not touch the savings. You ask why. He looks at you the way a surgeon looks at someone who has just suggested stitching with the wrong hand. He says, "Walk me through what happens to your $310,000 if you put it in the business and the business fails in 18 months. You say, "It's gone." He says, "And what happens to the compounding on that $310,000 over the next 20 years? You are quiet. He says, "That's also gone." You didn't lose $310,000. You lost everything that $310,000 was going to become. He slides a napkin across the table. He writes 2 numbers. $310,000 at 8% for 20 years, $1.44 million. $310,000 in a failed business, $0. He says, "That's the real cost of using your own money, not the amount, the future." You say, "But if the business succeeds," he says, "then you succeeded with money that was already yours. The return looks good, but you gave up the compounding to get it. A bank's money costs you 7%. Your money costs you everything it would have become." He orders coffee. He takes his time. He says, "I borrow for a different reason too. When I walk into a bank and ask for $400,000 to fund a business, they say no to bad ideas. They have no emotional investment in my vision. They look at the numbers. They look at the market. They look at whether this actually works. If they say yes, that's not just money. That's the first independent validation my business will ever receive." You say, "And if they say no?" He says, "Then I didn't have a business. I had an idea. The bank saved me from funding something that wasn't ready." You sit with that for a moment. He says, "Most self-funded founders skip that filter. They believe in the idea so completely that they never make anyone else validate it. They put in their own money before the idea has been tested by anyone with nothing to lose." You think about the $310,000 in your account. You think about the projections you ran. You realize you have never shown them to anyone who would tell you they were wrong. You take the meeting. You do not fully understand him yet. That is when your education begins.
The first year is technical. You work through the math slowly, not because it's complicated, because it's the kind of simple that takes time to fully accept. Tellen walks you through a case. A restaurant owner in Atlanta, 12 years of savings, $290,000. He put every dollar into the build-out. The restaurant opened. It worked. After 7 years, he sold it for $1.1 million. A 279% return. He was proud of it. Tellen pulls out the other scenario. What if he had borrowed the $290,000 at 6.5% from an SBA lender and kept his savings compounding at 8%? After 7 years, the savings account, $497,000.
The business, funded with the bank's money, sells for the same $1.1 million. He pays back the loan, he keeps the spread. Total, $1.4 million, plus the $497,000 still compounding. The restaurant owner's version, $1.1 million. No savings left. Same business, same sale price, same 7 years. The only difference was whose money funded it. You model it yourself that night. You run it at different interest rates, different return assumptions, different timelines. The gap is not marginal. It is structural. Every time you use your own capital to fund a business, you are paying a hidden cost that never appears on any income statement. The cost of what that capital would have become if left alone. The wealthy call this opportunity cost, but that phrase doesn't capture it. It isn't just an opportunity lost. It is a permanent subtraction from a future that was already building. Tellen says, the business is the vehicle. Your personal capital is the engine that funds everything else. You don't put the engine inside the vehicle. You keep the engine running and find a different fuel source for the vehicle. You write it down. You wonder briefly why no one taught this in any business school you know of. Then you stop wondering. You understand why they don't. If you knew this before you started, you might not need what they're selling.
In the second year, Tellen introduces you to a second principle. You are reviewing the financials of a hospitality business he is building. $2.2 million commercial loan. Interest rate, 6.8%. Annual interest cost, $149,600. You ask why he didn't use more equity to reduce the interest burden. He looks at you the way he looked at you in the first meeting. He says that $149,600 in interest is tax deductible. At a 37% marginal rate, the government is subsidizing $55,352 of my borrowing cost. My effective interest rate is not 6.8%. It is 4.3%. You are quiet. He says, now tell me what the effective cost of using your own post-tax savings would be. You already know. Your savings were built from after-tax income. You paid tax to accumulate them. If you put them into a business that fails, you lose post-tax dollars. There is no deduction. There is no subsidy. The government does not share in your loss. But when you borrow, the government shares in the cost of the debt. He says the tax code is not neutral on this question. It actively rewards borrowing to build assets. Every dollar of interest you pay on a legitimate business loan reduces your taxable income. Every dollar of personal savings you invest does not. You model it. $310,000 of personal savings invested, zero tax benefit on the risk. $310,000 borrowed at 6.8%, effective cost 4.3% after deduction. The government funds 37 cents of every dollar of interest. He says the structure of the funding is part of the return. Most people never see it because they're looking at the business and not the architecture underneath it. You start looking at the architecture. A manufacturing business in Ohio, Tellen structured the entire acquisition through a holding company. The interest on the acquisition loan offsets income from a separate portfolio company. The tax savings fund 2 years of working capital. He did not use a dollar of personal money. He used the tax code as a co-investor. That is when you start to understand that the game is not just about building the business. It is about understanding what the government will help you pay for. By the third year, you are no longer observing. You are building. You are advising a founder, a logistics company, $8 million in revenue, growing fast. She is about to inject $600,000 of personal savings into the expansion. She believes in it. The numbers support it. You ask her one question. If this goes wrong, what happens to your house?
She looks at you the way you looked at Tellen 3 years ago. She has not thought about this. Her savings and her business are legally the same entity. She is a sole proprietor. The business debt is her personal debt. The business failure is her personal failure, not just financially, legally. You spend 3 weeks restructuring before she invests $1. An LLC, a separate legal container. The business becomes a distinct entity from the person who owns it. Then you arrange the financing differently. A $600,000 business line of credit secured against the company's receivables, not against her home, not against her savings, against the business itself. The bank's exposure, the business. Her exposure, her equity stake, her time, her reputation. Not her home, not her savings, not her children's future. She draws down the line. The expansion proceeds. 14 months later, a supply chain disruption cuts revenue by 40% for 2 quarters. The business survives. Barely. If she had used personal savings, they would be gone. The house would be next. Because the capital was borrowed and structurally separated, the crisis stayed inside the LLC. Tellen calls it the first principle of business architecture. He says, separate yourself from the business before the business separates you from everything else. You write it down. Not because you will forget it, because it is the kind of sentence that needs to exist somewhere outside your head before it fully becomes true. In the 4th year, you were brought in to advise on a decision that tests everything you have learned. A family business, 3rd generation. A bakery chain that started as a single shop in 1971. 42 locations now, $34 million in revenue. The founder's grandson wants to expand into a new market. 14 new locations. Estimated cost, $4.2 million. He has $5.1 million in personal savings. He wants to self-fund. He says he doesn't want to owe anyone anything. He says debt makes him uncomfortable. He says he has worked too hard to give a bank a claim on what he's building. You hear yourself in every sentence. You ask him the question Tellen asked you 4 years ago. Walk me through what happens to your $5.1 million if 4 of these 14 locations fail in the first 2 years. He is quiet. You spend the next 2 hours walking him through the architecture. The SBA 7A loan up to $5 million, 10-year term, rate at prime plus 2.75%. Interest deductible. His personal savings untouched. His compounding uninterrupted. If the expansion works, he builds equity in 14 locations with the bank's money. If 4 locations fail, the losses are contained in the corporate structure. His personal savings, the $5.1 million, continue to compound outside the blast radius. He does not like it. He sits with it for a long time. He says, "It feels like I'm not committed if I'm not risking my own money." You say, "The bank requires a personal guarantee on SBA loans. You are committed. You are also protected. Those are not the same thing." He applies for the loan. The bank approves it. That approval from an institution with no emotional investment in his family's legacy is the first time anyone outside the family has looked at the numbers and agreed they work. Tellen calls later. He says, "You understand now." You do. The wealthy do not avoid using their own money because they are afraid to risk it. They avoid it because they understand what it actually is. Personal capital is not just money. It is compressed time. It is the accumulated product of years of labor, deferred gratification, and compounding that has already begun. To put it into a business is not just a financial decision. It is a decision about what that time will become. A bank's money costs 6%. Your money costs everything it would have been. The wealthy treat borrowed capital as a tool and personal capital as the engine that must never stop running. The tool builds the business. The engine funds the life, the investments, the next opportunity, the generation after this one. The structure is not incidental. It is the strategy. A business funded with borrowed money can fail and leave you intact. A business funded with personal savings can fail and take everything with it. The savings, the compounding, the safety margin, the next idea. The bank is not a last resort. It is the first filter. Before you fund a business with your own capital, a bank's approval means a dispassionate institution with no emotional investment in your vision looked at your numbers, your market, your cash flow, and agreed that this was worth backing. That is not a formality. That is external validation, the first real test your business will ever receive. The self-funded founder skips that test. They believe in the idea so completely that they fund it before it has been examined by anyone who doesn't. The wealthy do not skip the test. They make the bank say yes before they risk a dollar of anything. And then they don't risk a dollar of anything. They risk the bank's dollar. And they keep their own compounding. You still have $310,000 in the account. The business launched 6 months ago. It was funded with a $280,000 SBA loan and an $80,000 business line of credit. Your personal savings were not touched. The business is not profitable yet. That is expected. The projections said month 18. Last week, the bank reviewed the quarterly numbers. They did not call to express concern. They called to ask if you needed an additional credit facility for the expansion you had mentioned in the initial application. You said you would think about it. The $310,000 has grown to $341,000, quietly, without being asked, without being risked. The business is running on borrowed capital, structured correctly, with interest that partially offsets your tax liability. You have not used a dollar of your own money. You hold the structure. You do not own the bank's loan. You do not own the interest payments. You own the equity in a business that someone else's capital built. Another founder is in the room across the hall. She has $180,000 saved. She is about to put all of it in. She believes in the idea. That's not enough. She hasn't made the bank say yes yet. The meeting hasn't started. The game continues.